Now I'd like to present a few examples from Sweden, which are not in a home garden setting. There's a lot of, when I started talking about this, I had to pick examples from Britain, and then had a few Swedish examples of forest gardening. That was 7 years ago, almost to the date, that I had my first forest gardening lecture. I think I had 7 people in the audience. It was a freezing cold tent on somebody's lawn, and now you see it's sold out, and it's been like this the last few years, that a lot of people come to our lectures. So it's kind of coming into a more of a mainstream thing, and now I have to erase a lot of examples. I can't talk about not even 10% of the Swedish interesting forest gardening examples. So this is just going to be scratching the surface of the interesting examples of forest gardening that we have just in Sweden. One of them is called Odla stad and grow in the city, or grow the city, in Stockholm, just behind the the Museum of Natural History. It's a project that's for children, basically, trying to teach them ecology, edible plants, connections in nature, and so on. So it's quite a small patches of forest garden just behind the museum, and it's being used during the whole vegetation period, from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. There's kids running around and harvesting and planting and tasting and so on. And it looks quite good, given that this was at the end of the pre-summer season when I was there and took the picture. It wasn't really lots of compaction or so on. The only thing was that there was almost nothing to harvest except some grapes very high up, and I was the only one who could reach them. So they're good at harvesting, those kids. And one apple, somebody dared to take the last apple in the apple tree. So there's several initiatives of the same type, but that's the one that's come the farthest. I think it's 5 years old or 6 years old or something like that. There's also a lot of communal garden projects where people introduce forest gardening as we could probably say additional technique to normal organic farming methods. This one's called Bellevue Farm, also in central Stockholm, where they've created these keyhole beds. You walk in the middle, and it's kind of a circle, and then you can reach all around the bed. And this is one where they've planted haskap or honeysuckle as the main woody crop, and then some comfrey, onions. There's also this walking onion, lots of strawberries and other perennials that are being grown here. They also have the same layout for the annual gardens, and they have a few more of these with a tiny forest garden on the inside, but I didn't take any good pictures of that, where they have dwarfing apple trees, 2 or 3, and then really nice dense shrub and perennial layer underneath there. Really good to see, and it's open access. You can walk in there. You're not supposed to harvest, of course, because it's a private initiative, but it's nice to see and easy to reach if you ever should be in Stockholm. All right. Oh yeah, that's why it's Swedish time. It's like, oh, I have 1 hour left. I don't. Okay, I'll talk a bit more about. There's also communal projects. These were private initiatives in the southwest of Sweden. There's one city where they create an edible park based on forest gardening principles. The city of Lund is creating a large one, 1,600 square meters, which is going to be really interesting to see because they have a big budget for this. It's probably going to be planted next year. You're going to hear more about this. I did the design for this forest garden. It's part of a large landscape park with a lot of edible ingredients, but this one is, and there's one intense forest garden in it as well. It's going to be really interesting to see if they find all the plants I've put in the design. It's not my problem, fortunately. There's also a fantastic school garden that's they started to establish a couple of years ago. Very nice drawing made by one of my friends, Ola Andersson, who's also involved the kids in creating this forest garden. And this is the way it looked when they started planting. This could have been from last fall. And the kids are there helping, the parents are there, some of the teachers are involved. And it's really one of those lighthouse projects when it comes to engaging kids in forest gardening. They're starting to get a bit more attention now too. They've been kind of underneath the surface, but now it's really happening. A lot of people are getting interested. And that's just one of at least 10 school or preschool projects that I know of, and I definitely don't know of all projects. And if you come to Sweden or want to do something similar, I can recommend this to join this group. If you at least can read Swedish, it's easy to follow Skogsträdgården, a Facebook group started by one of my course participants. It now has 2,800 members. It's really active, really nice conversations about forest gardens going on. And there's also a map. If you have to search for a bit, but there's a map of all the people who are willing to tell the rest of the world that they have a forest garden. You can look at this map and see if they're open for visitors. You can call them or email them and so on. And that's really something that'd be nice to have in Finland too, I think. It's some kind of map. Yeah, it's quite easy to do.
We have some kind of map in the website of the Permaculture Association.
Oh, okay, good, yeah.
Permaculture.fi. You can find it from there.
Great, awesome, yeah.
Still not very functional, but coming to that.
Getting there, yeah. And you also have a forest gardening discussion group on Facebook in Finnish, which didn't seem that active, but mostly you posting, and a few others. All right, just the last 3 minutes or so, I'd like to talk about a few positive side effects. If we kind of, now we've talked about a lot of details as well about structure in the forest gardens, but if we kind of widen our perspective now for a few minutes, we can expect, just as a positive side effect, it's nothing we have to work for, it just happens by itself, but it's nice to point out to people who are skeptical, or if you need to sell in this concept even more, you can say, okay, we can sequester and store carbon in our forest gardens. It's not little actually. We can get carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it as biomass in the soil, or as humus in the soil, which then even gives us more nice stuff to eat in a more diverse habitat. We made a quick estimate of the potential for this, and just in the Swedish home gardens, if all of those were converted from lawn and concrete and rocks to forest garden, we could save about 1/5 of the Swedish CO2 emissions annually could be sequestered in these forest gardens. So 20%, quite massive, and that doesn't include any green areas in the cities or anything like that. It's just the home gardens, and that's a very conservative calculation we made there. It could be way more than that. Another one is biodiversity. The cultural landscape is getting more and more depleted of habitat, and a lot of those species that are having a hard time, are on the red lists or even extinct in our countries, they really like the forest garden. We saw that biodiversity was exploding once we had put in the first pond. Boom, biodiversity skyrocketed in the forest garden from basically nothing, because it was just grass and spruce and birches. And if we have this varied topography in the forest garden, lots of different species, we can attract a lot of the species that are that you found in the old cultural landscape, which was also diverse and small scale, not big monocultures that are being sprayed and so on. Has a huge impact, and could be the last chance for many of these animals that are having a hard time now. And the last side, there's a lot of other positive side effects, and I don't have time to go through them, but this is once again a harvest picture on the same table in Germany, just a different time of the year. 2 hours of walking around, I found black walnut, bladdernuts, quince, walnuts, lots of them. It's like a weed down there. Lots of chestnuts, Turkish hazel, figs even in some locations, like close to stone walls. Even this funny blue bean thing, which kind of contains a transparent slime that tastes like melon, and it looks really poisonous, but it's quite interesting taste-wise. You can scare people a lot when you eat that. That was just a nice walk in the woods, and I came home with a full backpack of this stuff, for lots of food, and then I started thinking, okay, I feel really good at it. This made me feel really good, kind of in harmony with myself, and I felt I had reconnected to something. And if you look back at what I talked about in the beginning, succession, and we're fighting succession, the way we farm the land, yeah, but that's just 10,000 years, and humans have been around for 200,000 years, maybe 300,000 even, depending on which scientists you ask. And what did we do before that? yeah, we walked around. We had like bulbs in our bags, leather bags, and we put some bulbs here and put some bulbs there. And we saw, oh, well, this tree has nice fruit. We should remove that tree because it's shading out this one. Let's chop it down. And we kind of, in subtle ways, have forever, basically, ever since we started walking the face of the earth, we've influenced our environments, but in a much more subtle way. And we say farming started 10,000 years ago, but yeah, but that's the type of farming where you create bare soil and sow annual plants in the bare soil. We've been farming forever, but it's been a different type of farming, and there's a discussion going on amongst ethnologists and anthropologists to kind of redefine the term farming, because we've been farming in a different way. There's tons of examples. I could talk about this for another hour, which I don't have. We can talk about it more on the break. And what I feel is that every time I walk out in these edible landscapes and come home with a harvest, I just feel so much in harmony. It's like all stress just disappears, and I feel this is kind of what I was made for, to roam the landscape and harvest and eat, and then we sit down together, we shell them, we talk. It's just kind of the way, I don't know if it's the meaning with life, but it's definitely something we humans were made for. And I feel the same thing with everyone I meet when we talk about forest gardening in these kind of contexts, on courses, whatever it is. People feel that it kind of triggers something inside them that many of us have lost entirely, this connection to the ecosystems we're a part of. We've been dominating them for 10,000 years, kind of being the dictators of the landscape. And once we start using the landscape in a different way, interacting with it, we're suddenly equals in the landscape. We're not the dictators of the landscape anymore. And of course, we can't become hunters and gatherers again. We're way too many people. Thanks to annual agriculture, we kind of multiplied a bit too much. But we all can become forest gardeners. And at least it's not going to be the same as roaming the landscape as our ancestors did, but it's kind of emulating the same feeling. So, yes, thanks for listening, and thanks for coming, and thanks for inviting me.